So first, we are going to start with the installation of the Metasploitable VM. So I will start sharing my screen. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is open VirtualBox. We attached instructions with the email as well as on our Instagram bio link and even in Discord on how to download VirtualBox if you haven't already, as well as the Kali Linux virtual machine that we will be using in conjunction with Metasploitable. Roshni just plugged the link, so if you need any of those downloads and the instructions, feel free to do it. Once again, this video will be posted on YouTube, so if you miss anything or fall behind, you'll be able to catch up later on. So the very first thing is I want you to locate your Metasploitable Vmdk file. Just an important thing to note, make sure you save it on your actual local machine and not in the cloud, because VirtualBox will sometimes have difficulties with the path of finding it, and it will break when you start to run it. So just make sure that you have the Vmdk file saved on your actual local machine. So just to make installation a lot easier. So what you first need to do is open up VirtualBox itself, then go up over here to the Tools tab and click on it. You'll see the menu options at the top change, and what you're going to do next is click on New. This will open up the wizard for basically installing a new virtual machine in it. So since we're working with Metasploitable version 2, you can name it whatever you want, but I personally, just for naming convention, am going to name it Metasploitable 2. Next, you're going to choose the path of where you want to save this virtual machine. I already have my default one here. You can make this whatever you want. Just once again, make sure it's saved on your local machine and not in the cloud. Then, because Metasploitable is a Linux operating system, from the drop-down for type, you're going to select Linux. Next, for version, you're going to select Ubuntu 64-bit, because that's the type that it is. Once you have this all set up, you're going to click Continue. And please, if any of you fall behind during the installation process or have any questions, feel free to speak up or throw it in the chat, and we'll be happy to help you. For memory size, we're just going to keep it the default of 1024 megabytes. So from here, we're going to click Continue. And this is the part where we have to know basically where the Vmdk file is. So from these list of options, you're going to select Use an existing virtual hard disk file. Now, it may not show up in this dropdown, so what you're going to have to do next is actually click this folder right here that says Choose a virtual hard disk file. From here, another dropdown menu is going to come up, but since we have never imported this Metasploitable Vmdk file, we're going to click on Add Disk Image here. Next, the menus pops up that basically you need to find where it is you saved the Vmdk file on your computer. Once again, just make sure it is on your local machine because it will run into issues if it's stored in the cloud. So mine is right here. You're just going to select it, make sure that's highlighted, and click Open. Once you do, you're just going to scroll all the way down to however long it is and make sure that you see that non-attached Metasploitable Vmdk is there. You click on it to make sure it's highlighted and then click Choose. Now it's selected and it's ready to be created. So go ahead and click Create, and boom, all the way at the bottom is the Metasploitable VM that we just opened up. So with that, now that it's installed, we have to just alter some of the settings. So make sure that's still clicked and go into Settings. Now, because Metasploitable is a vulnerable machine and the testing we're going to do on it with Kali Linux can actually bleed into your actual local machine and cause some possible damages. So to avoid this, we're going to go over to Network, option at the top, make sure adapter 1 is highlighted, make sure Enable Network Adapter is checked off, and for attached to, we're going to change from the drop-down NAT to NAT Network. Now what this does is make sure that the virtual machine will stay contained in VirtualBox. So it won't interact with your host local machine. It will only interact with the other virtual machines that you have, like over here in this category, in your actual VirtualBox. So limit any damage that could possibly leak out. And then the next thing we're going to do is click on Advanced drop-down. And for Promiscuous Mode, basically we're going to change it from Deny to Allow VMs. And as I explained, this will just make sure that the virtual machines will only be able to communicate. So Kali Linux and Metasploitable virtual machines will be able to talk to themselves, but not our actual computer. With that, we're going to click OK. and have the settings saved. And we're going to stop here for installation. Is everyone caught up? Any questions, any errors so far? Please put it in the chat or feel free to speak up. Okay, nothing so far, so I'll take it that everyone's good to go. So before we actually start opening Kali Linux and Metasploitable, we're just going to give a quick presentation on what exactly Metasploitable is, the types of interfaces and modules we're going to be looking at, and how it plays into the penetration testing methodology. Briefly in our tools and whatnot that we were showcasing. But for those of you who weren't, and assuming this is your first time being exposed to it, I'll just give a brief rundown of what it is. So Metasploitable is actually a virtual machine that's a vulnerable version of Linux, made specifically for testing purposes with using Metasploit. For our lab, we're going to be using the operating system Kali Linux to perform penetration testing against the Metasploitable. And Metasploit in itself is actually a framework. It's used to create security testing tools, exploit modules, and it creates basically a penetration testing system in general that's safe and secure for you to use certain tools, making your own or using those that are already created by other developers, as Metasploit is an open source software to perform penetration testing, which we will go over further on. So contained in Metasploit are different interfaces and modules that allow you to perform reconnaissance, scanning, maintaining access, and whatnot. So just for those to make it clear, if you've never been exposed to penetration testing terminology, an exploit is a method of taking advantage of a vulnerability existing in a system in order to obtain data from it or make it in an unintended manner than what the developers had in mind. A payload is what happens after the exploit. So it's the code or program that's executed, and it's essentially what does the damage or whatnot. A module is the code contained in an exploit that's for conducting the attack. So it's everything wrapped up into one kind of package that is used to make it much simpler for a threat actor to exploit a machine or a network or whatever their target is. Now, what we're going to see later on as Roshni goes over and actually performing the exploit is something called rhost and lhost. So these are variables assigned to, in respect to rhost, the remote host, in respect to lhost, the local host, your machine, for what you're intending to attack. So for example, rhost would be assigned the IP address of the target Metasploitable machine in this instance, and lhost would be the IP address of the Kali Linux machine, which the threat actor, are performing from. And MSF console is the interface, command line interface of what we are going to use to interact with Metasploitable to get it to do with what we want. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we use Metasploit and Metasploitable and Kali Linux all in an environment to recreate what regular penetration testers do out in the workplace. So there's generally 5 phases in the common methodology for penetration testing. They include reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and covering tracks. As is highlighted by this box right here, for the purposes of our lab, we are going to be focusing on the scanning aspect using the tool Nmap and gaining access by using the Metasploit module, exploit module, VSFTPD 2.3.4 backdoor. Oh, wait, you're muting, Roshni. Sorry.
Thank you. So kind of along the lines of what Nicole was saying, in order to even do this exploit, it's not like you're just on someone's system and you get to do it. There's ways to get there. There's ways to learn about the system first. So that's when Nmap comes in. Basically, Nmap is a network discovery, software or service that really takes advantage of being able to send kind of IP packets creatively and with different flags set in order to extract information. So Nmap is the GUI version. We're going to be working with Nmap, which is the command line utility. And the info is literally limitless. You can see which ports are open and closed. You can see if there's a firewall, what operating system they're using, etc. So if you want to try this at home, please only scan Nmap on your own network or on like a special website that they created called scanme.nmap.org and just kind of test things out on there. So without kind of getting super in depth, basically ports are the reason why you can surf the internet, go on your St. John's email and do 10 other things. It's because these services are communicating via different ports. So the scans that Nicole is going to demonstrate include a few of these. I'll just go over a couple of them. So a TCP Act Scan is basically kind of the standard scan to get information about whether a firewall is, I guess you could say a firewall is blocking that port or not, which is really important to be able to see then if you can get into the network after. Other things include a TCP Syn Scan, which is the classic scan sending SYN packets. I'm not sure if in your classes, but you'll be familiar with the TCP handshake. That's how two computers communicate with each other. So they send little SYN packets, which are kind of like open connections, basically. You can also specify the port you want to look at with -p, output the information wherever you want. And the most important command for our lab is version detection. You can't really do an exploit unless you know the vulnerabilities with the machine that you're trying to exploit. And to do that, we need to get some information about what version this actually is. So with that.
Okay. And as shown in this picture, these tools have real-world effects. They can cause a lot of damages. So for the purposes of this demonstration, it's for educational purposes only. Please do not try this on any other system without explicit permission from the owner. And without further ado, we will get started. So Roshni, yeah, thank you. And I will start sharing my screen. Okay, so hope that you still have VirtualBox open. If you're not, just have that open up again. And as we discussed, you should have downloaded Kali Linux from the instructions we sent. Just have it already installed and set up. Just to go over quickly again, you're going to make sure that you go to Settings, Network, and you just want to make sure that it's set to NAT network and allow VMs for promiscuous mode, because as I've mentioned before, this is how Metasploitable and Kali will be able to talk to each other. If this isn't set, then it just will not work, the exploit. So make sure you have those settings adjusted. And we will start Kali Linux and drop down to Metasploitable and start that as well.
I had a question.
Sure.
So I'm on my Kali Linux settings, and when I'm on the network tab and I switch it to attach to NAT network, there's no option for name, and it also won't allow me to make those settings because it says invalid settings detected.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
1 second. So let me just see if I go back to mine. So settings, network. Okay, so you're saying to drop down here, you can't find that network? Or
No, I'm connected. It says attached to NAT network, but it just won't let me like click OK or set the setting because it says on the bottom invalid settings detected.
Huh.
I'm not sure what exactly it is. Maybe something in advanced. I am wrong, but
does it let you actually drop down for advanced?
yeah, it does.
Okay. Anything different from what you're seeing right here, or?
Yeah, I mean, I have everything about right.
Okay.
It still won't allow me to finalize the settings.
That's odd. Could you go to storage for me real quick? And
Sure.
for controller under SATA, is this, well, it would be a different name, but essentially does it say Kali Linux.vdi?
Yeah, it's Kali Linux, yeah, VDI.
Huh.
Is this the same Kali distribution we sent out, or is this one you had prior to the meeting?
I downloaded this like a few months ago before the meeting, so it could be that.
Gotcha. It could very well be that. What we could do just to kind of keep the presentation going on,
Yeah.
if you want to stay afterwards, I could definitely partner up with you and do some troubleshooting. But for
Okay,
now,
sure.
I guess just so we see what we're going to be doing, I'll try
Okay.
to troubleshoot that with you afterwards. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, sounds good, Justin.
Awesome. And yeah, I do remember when I was doing the settings, I had to create my own name for the NAT network. There was no like previous option either. But
I
yeah,
see,
thanks
okay.
for like pointing out your issue. I hope like no one else is dealing with that.
Yeah,
But we'll work it out.
too.
VirtualBox sometimes has certain issues with network settings. Literally, it could make or break a VM from what I've seen in the past. So yeah, we'll definitely partner up with you afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Very cool. Nicole, back to you.
Sure thing. All right. So I actually do have a different Kali than what was sent out. So my username and password is going to be different from yours. But besides that, everything else will be exactly the same. So for your guys' VM that was sent out, the username is Kali minus root, and the password will also be Kali. All lowercase, so lowercase k, lowercase a, lowercase l, and lowercase I. Okay, and for for Metasploitable VM, it actually says it right here, log in with msfadmin as the username and msfadmin for the password. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. And boom, we're in. Okay, so for the time being, we're going to just move Metasploitable to the side, and we're going to focus on Kali Linux. So is my screen size good for everyone? Can you basically see pretty clearly on the Kali Linux? Or I can make a video if that's better.
Looks fine.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing we're going to do is open up a terminal. So on the side banner should be listed there. If it's not, you could go to where show applications are. It's usually designated by a couple of boxes. Click on that, and you could just search for terminal. Already opened up, so that's where you can find it. We're also going to open up a file editor. So you're going to want to type in file, well, text editor, and it should pop up right here. So we're going to open one of those as well. Okay, let's move this off to the side. This here, and I'll zoom into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is find out the IP address for our Kali Linux machine. Once again, this is going to be what we're using to attack the Metasploitable and run the exploit that Roshni will be going into as soon as I set it. So we're going to run the command ifconfig in the terminal. Zoom in one more time. Sure. Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So once you run this command, you're going to get two interfaces usually. One of them is an Ethernet, the other one is a loopback. For our purposes, we're just going to be focusing on the Ethernet. What we want to look for here is inet, which is our IP address, and the net mask, which is the subnet of which our machine is running on in the network. So for the text document, the reason why I had you open up is just for simplicity's sake, we're going to record the Kali Linux IP address, because this is going to be very important as we go further. So it could be different as well. My IP address may be different than what's showing up on yours, and that's completely fine. Just once again, make sure that you record whatever it is respective to your machine. And for those who may be unfamiliar of how networking works, I'm just going to explain very quickly why this is important. This right here is essentially a /24 network. There's 8 bits, 8 bits, 8 bits, designated by 255, 255, 255. And we're also going to record this as it will play an important part later for when we use Nmap. Next, now we're going to actually use Nmap to find the IP address of Metasploitable. So once again, we're pretending that we are in a penetration testing environment where we don't know what the Metasploitable IP address is. So we're going to run a scan to find exactly that. So the command from the Kali Linux terminal that we're going to run, and make sure that you're also in root just to make things easier. If you're not, you could do sudo and it'll allow you to go in. I'm already in it, hence why nothing happens. So back to the command. You're going to make sure that you type in nmap dash lowercase s, uppercase p, and then this is where the subnet comes into play. So essentially what this means is that since we already know that the virtual machines for Kali and Metasploitable are running on the same network, they will have the same subnet mask. So what 255.255.255 means is that the first 3 bits of this will be the same. So we're going to put 10.0.2 and run that scan on the network. And it'll find all the other hosts that are designated here. And since 0 is designated for the last bit here, we are going to put an asterisk, which represents a wildcard, as it's going to basically scan through for all hosts on the network, regardless of whatever their last bit in their IP address is. So we're going to run that command. Nmap has started, and boom, we get this output. We're going to ignore basically these two right here, but for our purposes, we're interested in what came up. So Oracle VirtualBox, it successfully found other hosts. As we could see here, this is actually our machine that it found on the network, as this is our IP address, which was recorded right here. But what's this? We actually found the IP address for Metasploitable. This right here, this output with the MAC address right here and the IP address, this is what we're going to use to run further attacks on Metasploitable. So if you go to your file text, you're just going to type in Metasploitable IP and record whatever it is that came up for you. And once again, that may be a different IP address. Just make sure you record whatever was respective to yours. Okay. And with that, before we actually lead into the attack, I just want to show a couple of more different scans you could do once you actually discover the IP address for your target device. So actually, before I start that, is everyone caught up? Any questions before I move on? Okay, you guys are good. So moving on, as Roshni said in her presentation, there are a ton of different scans that Nmap is able to perform. And because we only have one other host machine on our network, output will probably look about the same because we had nothing else configured. But all these different type of commands I'm going to show you guys will typically in a regular environment yield very different results. So the very first one I'm going to do is the Tcp Acknowledgement Scan that Roshni talked about. So to perform this one, we type in Nmap - lowercase s, uppercase a, and the IP address of our target, which once again, if we refer back to the text, is 10.0.2.13. We're going to run that, and boom. It scanned 1,000 ports, and they were all unfiltered, it determined. Now, once again, because this was the only thing that we had on their TCP acknowledgement, there was no traffic going through. We're not really running any kind of searches on the Metasploitable VM right now, so we didn't really find anything. But another scan we could do that will most definitely reveal more results is something called a Christmas tree scan. So to perform this, we do Nmap - lowercase s, uppercase x, and the IP address. And boom, as you can see, there's a lot more results that showed up for this time around. So for those who may be unfamiliar, a Christmas tree scan, literally denoted as XMAS, is a type of scan that when you, let's say, inspect a packet on Wireshark or any kind of other sniffing tool, you'll see a breakdown of bits and of categories inside the frames that were sent. So with this one, it sends a bunch of pings essentially that have it so that when you expand each collapsible part of the frame, it looks like a Christmas tree. So it's just a way of probing more into traffic being sent over the network. And as we could see here, a ton of different ports were found to be open. These ones are exactly filtered. And these are the services that are running on them. Some of these might be familiar: File Transfer Protocol, SSH, Telnet, SMTP, which is an email protocol, HTTP, which allows you to go on the web, and as such. So we're going to run a couple of more commands just to get a little bit more comfortable with using Nmap. Another type that we could do actually is one to show only open ports. So these appear to be the open ports, but we'll run another one. So you could do Nmap - open, and then IP address. And boom, found all open ports. For the most part, it seems that this was the same output it found before. And once again, if this was in a real environment, the results will usually vary. It's just that we only have one other host up on this network, so it'll usually yield the same exact thing. Another thing we could do is if we didn't want to have all the way up until the thousands of ports being scanned, we could actually specify the range that we want to do. So we could do that by doing Nmap IP address of our target host, and -p, and let's say if we want to do a range of 23 to 50 ports to scan. And boom, it did that, and from that range, it only found port 23 and 25 that was open. Okay, another thing we could do is, as you can see, this is a lot of output that's coming out. And let's say if we didn't want to have to keep scrolling up and down, or if we wanted to save this output and put it maybe into Wireshark or another sniffer or some other tool that will manipulate the data, we could save this as a file instead of copying and pasting just by actually running this command. So if we do nmap dash lowercase o uppercase n, and first, before we do this, we want to see what directory we're in, just so we know we could find it. So by performing the command ls, this lists the directory we're in the command line interface. Just for simplicity's sake, let's do cd documents and fill that out. What this will do is change the directory location we are in the command line terminal to the documents folder. So press enter, and we could do pwd, which means print working directory, to see where we are, just to confirm. And we are in the documents folder. So whatever we save from running the nmap command, it will be found here. So to save the output for a scan, we could do nmap dash lowercase uppercase n. We could call it scan.txt. So this will be a text file. You can name it if you want, just for simplicity's sake, we'll be calling it scan. And put the IP address for the Metasploitable Vm, our target. And boom. So all of this output right here will be now found in this directory. So if we do ls, there is scan.txt. And if we do gedit scan.txt, as you can see, it's successfully saved, and the entire output for every single port that we just found. So this is a neat way, makes it centralized and easy to find. Okay, and so now the command that we've all been waiting for, as we performed other scans and we've seen that port 21 is running the service FTP, this is the port that we're actually going to be focusing our exploit on. However, we don't really have that much information just from this output. So let's say if you wanted to attack the FTP service running on it, it's good to know what exact version it is and what exact type of server that it's running on is. So what Nmap has is a neat feature to actually do version scanning. So to find out exactly what version of FTP we're working with, you could do the command nmap dash lowercase s uppercase v, the Metasploitable IP address. And because we know it's port 21, we could specify, as shown before, dash P21. Let's see what we do this. Okay, perfect. Yep. So the output right here shows port 21, TCP is open, the service running is FTP, and the version of the server running on this is VSFPTPD version 2.3.4. Now, from here, I'll let Roshni take it, and this is where we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of actually exploiting this port.
Okay, so now that we're armed with kind of the information that we actually need to run this exploit, we can actually do it. So picture you're a pen tester, you find out the FTP server's running this sort of weird version, you look it up, there's vulnerabilities on there, and this is when we can actually kind of get to the exploit part. So just jump into your Kali machine, type in msf console, and that should be a familiar command since Nicole talked about it during the PowerPoint. This is going to open up the interface that we need to interact with the Metasploitable machine. So just give it a second. Usually takes a moment. There we go. We're in. So it should kind of give like this cool sort of Metasploit, I guess, picture there. So this is kind of the script kiddie in us. We're going to use a pre-built command or set of codes that Metasploit already has to exploit the vulnerability in that version of FTP. But the difference is we're actually going to try to understand why it works as well so that we can graduate from script kiddie status. So let's get started. So we're going to do the command use exploit. Unix, I'll do it all together. Unix FTP VSFTPD version 2.3.4 and backdoor. Use exploit FTP. Oh, oops, I spelled it wrong. Backdoor. Okay, cool. So we're in. So basically, this is called a Metasploit module, which is basically kind of like just a set of code instructions ready to go. So basically, we're kind of in the program right now. If you've ever taken like a programming class, we're basically in the program. So let's see, let's show options and kind of see what we're working with in this pre-built module. So according to this, it looks like we do not have an IP address set up for our host, which makes sense. We never told it which machine to target. So we're going to do that now. So we're going to use the command set our hosts to the IP address of your Metasploit machine. So mine is 10.0.2.6. Yours might be slightly different. Okay, it's set. And now everyone's favorite command, we're going to do run. Okay, and it found the shell. So just as a little bit of context, when we say backdoor, we basically mean we are into the system. We have access to their kind of command line interface and shell, which means you can basically do anything on their system. So just to make sure that we are truly in and Metasploit is not lying to us, I'm going to do who am I? I'm root. Okay, they already even gave us admin permission. So clearly the server was not set up correctly. Okay. Now I kind of just want to see what the IP address is just to make sure we're truly in the system. And it actually says .2.6, which is the IP address that we were trying to get into. So technically we could do anything in this system now. So one example of something that you could do is something called establish persistence. So before I get into that, are there any questions about kind of what I've done so far? We're only working in the Kali machine, but Metasploit should be open as well right now. If there are no other questions, then I can actually show you how to establish persistence. So let's see. I know this doesn't look much like a normal command line interface here, but it is indeed working. So first, I'm just going to do sudo su. It should be into the machine already since we're root. And then I'm going to do sudo user add. So now I'm going to add my very own user into this. And just pick any username. I'll just put hello everyone or hello y'all. Okay, so looks like it did something, but let's see if it actually worked. So at this point, I'm going to jump into the Metasploitable machine. I know it's a little tiny, but this part of the lab is quick. This is Oracle Box for you. So basically, I'm in the Metasploitable machine. I'm going to do just cd // because I want to just get out into the highest directory that I can. And then we're going to navigate to the etc. directory, so cd etc. Let's see what's in there. I see a password file. That looks good. So I'm going to do cat, which cat allows you to read basically whatever's in that directory. Password. Okay. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see that indeed we did add a user. I know it's very tiny, and it's called hello y'all. It's literally there, and it gave me, my own directory within home. It's all there. And the whole point of this is establishing persistence. This would not be something that a pen tester does because the whole point is you do your job, you go home, awesome. But someone who has bad intentions would be able to establish a user, and now they could just log on basically normally because they have a user inside of the system. So that is a pretty dangerous thing to do. So with that, that is basically kind of a standard Metasploit exploit for you to be able to do. So with that, I will continue to share my screen and actually pass it back to Nicole to show you why this exploit even worked in the first place. Nicole, take it away.
Okay, so why did this exploit work? Like, what is behind the actual? Because as you can see, Metasploit does all the work ourselves. That's why it's so convenient, and that's why people that use it are usually dubbed script kiddies, because it doesn't require a higher level of knowledge of the systems to be able to cause damage. They're already packaged and ready to be used in the modules that they come with. So for those, I know we kept talking about FTP. So just for clarification, FTP is a part of a suite of protocols. This one specifically called File Transfer Protocol, and it operates at the transport layer of the TCP IP model, for those unfamiliar. And it's used primarily to transfer files between an FTP server and different computers via the internet or whatever connection is being used. It's vital in workplace environments because it just makes it a lot easier to transfer documents from one department to another per se. So for example, if you have a bunch of files you want to upload to a website, you can just use FTP to transfer the files, hosting to the server directly. And so as we were able to discover using Nmap, we were running on Metasploitable version 2.3.4 of VSFTPD, which VSFTPD, sorry, it's a tongue twister. It was a vulnerable version this morning. It contained a backdoor which actually was able to be exploited by intruders. And developers soon realized this was the case, and they were able to patch it. Unfortunately, though, a lot of people still have this, even to this day, this version downloaded onto their machines, and so it's a open attack vector that can be exploited. The backdoor was actually the payload was actually initiated to response using the smiley face character, so literally the colon right parentheses combination in the username. As you can see right here, this is a snippet of the code that was vulnerable. So from lines 86 down to 91, the socket, which a socket is essentially the connection at the end of a port. So they work in conjunction with the port. And as you can see right here, our port is assigned 6,200, which reassigns it. So this right here, the code allows the structure to set up a binding socket and a listener to process and listen on the socket itself for incoming connections. So it's run in the server context, hence why we were able to even go into root, because that's the highest privileges that there can be. And the listener is it's manipulated by the remote attacker for setting up the connection. And so line 94, as I said right there, it basically shows that port 6,200 was the one that we were listening on to run exploit and actually gain access. And for those interested in the source code itself, Metasploit, as I said, is open source. So all of it is available in a GitHub repository. So I'll actually put the link in the description for if anyone's interested in looking at more of the code, because this was only a couple of lines shown that we showed you guys, really the most important in relation to the lab. But there's tons of exploits out there that you guys could look into and see for yourself.
I'm also going to drop all of the commands that we did today, because I know I used to miss commands all the time in these workshops. So I'm throwing that in the chat as well.